on WNYC, AM 820.
How are you?
Hi, I'm Elmore Leonard, working novelist, sometimes screenwriter.
We're getting going right
listening
now.
To
Right,
New York
here I am. I'm sitting.
Leonard Lopez on WNYC.
Here's the coffee, thank you.
Melissa Jo, you'll remember it.
I will.
Fresh from Oxford and judged too thin for combat duty, in the midst of World War II, John Mortimer was assigned to the British Army's propaganda film unit. He proudly wore fatigues with the word scriptwriter sewn on the shoulder. In reminiscing about this period in his latest memoir, Murderers and Friends, Another Part of Life from Viking, Mortimer has this to say: "I don't think anyone who hasn't lived through those years can understand how different they were from the hopelessly divided and aimless Britain of today. There was an extraordinary feeling of unity, a common aim which was not only to win the war but to create a juster society after it was over. Now, no one can talk of a juster society without being asked, first, how much is it going to cost, and then greeted with almost universal derision." I'm pleased to welcome back to New York & Company the man who, among other achievements, is probably best known, on these shores anyway, as the creator of the immortal Horace Rumpole. Welcome, John Mortimer, to New York & Company.
Very nice to be here.
This is the second volume of memoirs. The first was Clinging to the Wreckage in 1982, which covered your childhood leading up to your early career as a barrister. But this one is not, we're not talking autobiography here. We are talking memoir, and somebody described it as anecdotage.
Yes, it really isn't meant to be, because the last 20 years of anybody's life hasn't got a story. I mean, you've achieved what little you're going to achieve, so there's not that sort of drama of growing up.
Well, the first book was more autobiography.
Yes, it was. But this is really a description of the passing show of people that crossed my path, of murderers that I was friendly with, of friends, one who was a murderer, and of the actors that I've met and the people I've met writing, and stories about them. Yes, that's true.
And if any complaint can be made, it's that perhaps there's less of you here than readers might have wanted, more of the people you've known over the years.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I mean, I've really treated myself as an observer of life passing, in a way, for instance, that Isherwood did in his Berlin Diaries. I mean, there's not much about him, but all the characters that pass by are very vivid.
An article in the New Yorker says that you want to be liked, not understood.
Well, I don't know whether that's true. I didn't write a book which would try to make people understand me. That's true. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write a book that make people understand how I reacted to and understand the people that passed by. And really, that's the way of autobiographical novels. If you take, for instance, David Copperfield. David Copperfield is the dullest person in David Copperfield. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is very vivid. Great Expectations. Those I books of Dickens are very uncommunicative about the central character.
And in this book, we do get a feeling that not everyone in your life has pleased you, and not just politicians or former wives, but Rex Harrison.
Well, Rex Harrison
dealt with rather harshly.
Well, Rex Harrison happened to be a wonderful light comedy actor who was not a very nice person. I mean, my encounters with Rex Harrison were really mainly him saying that various parts wouldn't be right for him because his public wouldn't like him to play any person who wasn't absolutely perfect, I wrote a Fado farce where the man is impotent, and Rex Harrison said, "Oh no, I can't be impotent. Maybe just once I was." And then he did a play called Staircase where he had to be gay. He said, "I don't think I can be gay. My public wouldn't like that. Just a little bit of each." And then when he did Voyage Round My Father, he was going to make a film Voyage Round My Father, and my father was blind. I knew exactly what was going to happen. He said, "My public wouldn't like me to be really blind. I'm sure I can see bits and pieces."
So Laurence Olivier wound up.
So Laurence Olivier didn't mind being totally blind, yeah.
Well, actually, one of the most damning stories you tell about Harrison is that George Cukor fought very hard to get him put in the film.
Yes.
And because the studio people did not want him
That's
in that
right.
film. And then after he got the part, he said, well, maybe Cukor isn't the right director.
That's right. After Cukor fought for a year and laid his career on the line. But he was, one of the other great revealing things about Rex is that I went to the south of France to discuss him doing Voyage Round My Father, where David Niven, who was a great friend of mine, lived. And I was just about to go out and meet Rex, and the telephone rang, and this Rex voice said, "Hello, John, how are you?" I said, "Oh, hello, Rex." And he said, "I just want to tell you before the others get here, you're a complete bastard. You know, you're an absolute awful little person." And my glasses all misted up with tear. And then there was a great laugh, and it was Niven doing his Rex Harrison imitation, but it was so exactly what I knew was going to happen.
So Niven, I guess everybody in the British theatre world and film world thought that about Rex Harrison?
Well, anybody, or his wives, or anybody who comes in very close contact with him, I think. Well, and everybody loved Niven.
Well, here you not only have Rex Harrison playing your father, but three of the greatest actors of our time, Laurence Olivier, Michael Redgrave, and Alec Guinness. But the funny story, unfortunately, the saddest story, is the one you tell about Michael Redgrave.
Oh, yes, Michael
playing him in the theater.
That's right. Michael Redgrave took it on when he was towards the end of his career, and he wasn't able to remember his lines. He said he could remember his lines, but he didn't. And so he had a hearing aid in his ear, which the person in the prompt corner would say all the lines, and he'd then be able to repeat them.
And give theatre direction as well.
Yes.
Directions, move to the
left and sit on the sofa and all that. And then one terrible night, this device got mixed up with the messages from radio taxi cabs, and my father, played by Michael Redgrave, moved across the stage and sat next to my mother and said, "I'm instructed to proceed immediately to number 4 Flask Walk, Hampstead." Which I think everybody thought was a line out of the play from.
Except the other actor.
Except for the other actor was very, very confused.
The film was shot in your home, and this is you've lived in the same home all your life, haven't you?
Yes, my father built the house, but when I was about 7, built the house I live in. And, I think it's a sort of metaphor of a writer's life. I watched my father die in the bed where I sleep now, and I then watched Laurence Olivier act my father's death, and
in the same bed.
In the same bed, and Alan Bates act me watching it. And
you didn't feel that was a bit spooky?
Yes, very, very, very spooky. But I feel that that's what writers do. You know, you experience things and then you translate them into drama or whatever, or some sort of art, and have to live through them again.
Well, somebody's pointed out that only the very rich or the very poor have these experiences of growing up and living all their lives in the same house. Very,
very rare. I think it's very rare in America and pretty rare in England. But it's something very wonderful about it. I've got a 10-year-old daughter now who plays in the same garden and in the same woods that I played in, and it's very nice. Except in a way, I feel I haven't ever gone anywhere in the world.
Your mother, Kathleen, seems to have gotten short shrift in this book. Why is that?
Well, I don't know. I wrote more about her than I've written before. I followed her footsteps to South Africa, where she was a teacher, and she got rather short shrift in Voyage Round My Father, I think because my father and I had such a strong alliance that she was a little left out, which was something I very much regret.
Mm-hmm. She was a promising painter.
She was a very good painter, and she had a picture in the Paris Salon, and she taught art, and she was very brave because she went off to South Africa just after the Boer War, at the turn of the century, and taught art and rode across the prairies there and dived naked into waterfalls, and then married my father and spent the rest of her life reading aloud to him, really.
You hardly mention your first wife, the writer Penelope Mortimer here. Actually, your second wife is also named Penelope.
I know, very convenient, or whatever you think.
Is that because you were hurt by her rather unflattering depiction of you in her book About Time too?
Well, I certainly didn't want to get into a controversy about the accuracy or not of that.
Have you read that book?
I've read bits of it. Yes, I have. And
did you recognize yourself in that?
Well, not really, no. But I find it difficult to recognize myself in anything that's written about me, really.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Because
people miss you a lot, even a wife of 23 years.
I hope so. Yeah. I'm reading the New Yorker profile. That was quite an interesting character, but I'm not sure it was me. It was altogether me, and I rather like to keep a few secrets.
Mm-hmm. Even from a wife.
Certainly from a wife.
John Mortimer's latest book is called Murderers and Other Friends, Another Part of Life. It's published by Viking. You're listening to New York and Company on AM 820 WNYC, New York Public Radio. I'm Leonard Lopez. Well, when you married Penelope Mortimer, she was the famous writer, and you were the beginning writer, and for a long time that's the way it remained. And now I understand she was very depressed at the thought that she would be remembered as your ex-wife.
Well, it wasn't. That's not altogether true. When I married her, I'd just written my first novel, which was very, very well received, and so. But then we sort of went forward together, and then she wrote a book called The Pumpkin Eater, which was a huge success, and she wrote for the New Yorker, and there was a time when she was certainly a better known writer than I was, and then I began to write some plays. But all that, of course, is one of the reasons why two writers shouldn't marry each other, really, or two actors shouldn't marry each other.
Because there is competition. Yes,
and also you're using the same material, really. If you live together with someone, the same things happen to you both, and you use up the same material.
Of course, you have the advantage of the law practice.
I had the law practice, exactly.
But the law practice is really not something that you wrote a lot about in the early years, was it? Other than in writing about your father? Well,
my early novels, one of them was all about a divorce case, and then I wrote a play. My real turning point was I wrote a play called Doc Brief, which was a little one-act play about a very unsuccessful murderer and about a very even more unsuccessful barrister, which became a theatre play, a film with Peter Sellers in it. Had a huge life, and that was about the law. So, and then of course with Rumpole, the law began to enter really into it.
But outside of the writing, 1977 seems to have been somewhat of a turning point from your perspective. That's when you handled an important case defending the editors of a newspaper called Gay News.
Well, my real turning point is in 1970. I did a case called the Oz Trial, which was the editors of a school kids magazine, which was meant to have corrupted youth, and at the same time, Voyager and My Father was on in the West End, and at the same time, I remarried the second Penelope. That was when Clinging to Wreckage ends, and this book really begins. 1977, I did defend a book called Gay News, and it was accused of blasphemy, and we discovered that there was a law of blasphemy in England, which we hadn't thought existed since the Spanish Inquisition, and it was accused of writing a blasphemous poem about the love of the centurion for the body of Jesus Christ, and we lost it, and I lost the Gay News case. I think it was a very bad thing because it was decided that we had a blasphemy law, and so everybody else thought they were entitled to one, and of course that led to the fatwa against Salman Rushdie, and he was condemned to death for blasphemy.
Well, Britain doesn't have a written constitution and doesn't have a Bill of Rights as a result, doesn't have a freedom of speech amendment, and even if there are laws written to defend freedom of speech, they can easily be written out of law, or it can have all sorts of exceptions.
Well, we do. I mean, we had Magna Carta in 1215, which made you entitled to be tried by your peers. We did have a Bill of Rights in the time of Charles in the time of the Parliament, which gave you habeas corpus and so on. But we don't have a written constitution. We don't have free speech in the Constitution, which you have. Whether or not it's an advantage to have a written constitution, I'm not altogether sure. Because if you had one now, you would kind of solidify the political attitudes. It would be awful to have a Newt Gingrich constitution, which was or a conservative constitution, which
That's
was
what happened in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. And it was very.
Over it.
That's right, and all sorts of things, like for instance, it could keep private schooling in perpetuity. All sorts of things that you might not want. So not having a constitution, in a way, makes the law move with the times more, I think.
There's a lot about politics in this book. In fact, I opened with a statement about how things seemed, the whole attitude of the public in England during World War II seemed to be so antithetical to what's going on now. Is it because of Margaret Thatcher that all of that has been turned around? Did she change the way people thought about what a country should be?
Very largely, because we had a big Labour landslide after the war, and the Labour government came and introduced the welfare state and introduced a much more equal society.